one of the favorite parts of my job is interacting with students. I do a lot of administration, and really one of the most favorite parts of my job is simply interacting with students and watching people grow into teaching and being a teacher. My time in the classroom, my 7 years in the high school science classroom was just so formative for me, and I think very fondly back to it. So without further ado, I'm going to ask each of our alums to introduce themselves, and I'm going to call people in the order I see them on the screen. And then I will start asking some questions, and we'll be sure to leave plenty of time for you to ask questions to our alums. So I'm going to go first with Laura, and then Tate, Brent, and then Nick in that order. So if you want to introduce yourself, talk about where you're teaching now, what your certification area is, that kind of thing. All right.
Hi, my name is Laura Rothy. My certification area is secondary ESOL, and I am now an ESOL teacher in Fairfax County, Virginia. I teach at Annandale High School, and it's a pleasure to be back here. It's been a couple of years, so I missed my time at AU a lot.
Hello, I am Tate Alvarez. I was in the MAT online program, and I'm currently a first and second grade teacher at a small progressive project-based learning school. I am really thankful to be here and excited to share with you anything that I can be helpful with you for.
Hello, I'm Brent LaPagula. I am currently a fifth grade teacher, teaching all subjects at Chevy Chase Elementary in Montgomery County. MAT as well, I went through it with Tate, graduated December of 2019, right? And certified in elementary ed 1 through 6, middle school social studies, high school social studies, middle school English, and high school English. So happy to answer any questions. And love the program in American, and really great to see everybody, honestly. So.
Hey everyone, thanks for stopping by and come to talk with us and hear us old alumni say some few things about the program. I feel right at home because I just taught today, so I'm sure everybody else is very comfortable with the online setting by now. My name is Nicholas Maraska. I was MAT. I graduated in spring 2020, right at the tail end of getting online, but I spent most of my years being a graduate assistant actually for the MAT program. So I know a few things. I'm a little out of practice, but I still know a few things about the MAT program if you have any questions. But I thoroughly enjoyed my time. I work now at a middle school, Pyle Middle School in Bethesda. And I thoroughly enjoy it. This is my first year teaching online, so who would have thought? But it's been exciting, and I look forward to answering questions and to hearing more about you all later.
Thank you. Thank you. So I'm going to ask the first question, and I'm going to ask our alum to respond in reverse order. So go Nick, Brent, Tate, and then Laura. And the first question is, how did your AU degree best help prepare you for your current career?
All right, I love starting out first. So my AU degree made me realize in joining and doing a master's program made me realize exactly how much I don't know. I thought, maybe I kind of would be okay for teaching without the master's program, and then I was absolutely wrong. As soon as I went into classes, I realized, wow, that there's so much more of a science and complexity to teaching that people outside the program or outside of the profession don't necessarily understand or comprehend or even respect. So, being a part of it and learning all the stuff in the classroom and then being able to apply it in person was huge. Spending a full year, I had to do 2 years in the program, but spending a full year just learning kind of more about pedagogy and practices, and then actually going out and being, doing practicum and doing student teaching was super helpful, and having teachers and resources there to kind of bounce ideas off of you as you're still figuring out teaching was huge. So I love that. It also prepared me for flexibility too. I think being a teacher is being extremely flexible, and through my teaching situations, I've had opportunities where I've been in different types of, socioeconomic and demographical climates within the DMV area. And so I've been flexible with, traveling and getting around, but also interacting with different students. Also been flexible when it comes to how do you teach when you don't even have a classroom. A student taught in a place that didn't even have me in a classroom. So I was a mobile and I was going around. Also flexibility with the online format because I was student teaching halfway through my final year, and then eventually we all went online. So that made me definitely increase my resilience and made me a more flexible educator than probably I would have been without this experience.
Yeah, for me as well, I would say all the classes that we took, like every time we took a class, I have a sort of like a problem. My problem is I'm interested in everything that I learn about, and I want to take it as deeply as I possibly can. So you obviously can't do that with every single class, but like I remember each class that I've had and all the ways that I wanted to continue each class, from the science class, especially actually, because I was supposed to teach science and social studies in 5th grade, and we stopped departmentalizing after COVID. So hopefully we go back to that in September. But anyway, like I just realized how much you don't know about anything. You just keep, it's all like a continuous learning process. And so I found like every single class that I took, I wanted to learn a lot more about each class. Well, that's going to be really difficult. So I would say the one thing that I learned about the program itself, other than it being awesome and having like a real community and things like that, was simply the depth of knowledge and the breadth of knowledge. And then you sort of decide like which pathway you want to take. So for me, it was really like at this stage in my life, it's like pedagogy. Like I really want to learn like how to be a better teacher, not necessarily like the specifics of any particular subject or field. I think you can learn that, but I really am interested in the psychology of learning. And I think that was our first class, and so I'm like fascinated with that. So I think like overall, the course in general just taught me like to really explore what it is I'm actually super interested in. And, when you're in the classroom, then you find you might be more interested in some things than other things, and you want to explore those avenues. So right now I'm doing like an SLO, like the objectives for students, and I'm trying to like write up a whole thing where my students are going to succeed and things like that. So like the psychology of learning really plays a part in that process, me being a better teacher, and I think that's what it's really all about. So I guess not realizing that I don't know really very much but there's a lot more that I want to know about. That's what I learned, I guess, or came out of. So
for me, I think when I'm trying to think of like what's something that I'm currently doing now at AU really helped me for. So I'm currently at a project-based learning school, and I really love it. I have a lot of autonomy in the things that I teach. I write the curriculum that I actually implement for my students. But prior to AU, I was at a school that I was given curriculum, and it was sort of really scripted, and I was able to adapt the curriculum, but I wasn't really writing it myself. And so AU gave me that experience of the different the courses that I took. It was my first time writing a lesson plan from scratch. It was my first time creating a unit and outlining a unit from scratch, creating assessments from scratch. And not only that, but really good lessons, getting feedback from my brilliant instructors, but also my peers in the community that I was in, getting feedback, having conversations, workshopping them together, and then just strengthening that skill set for myself. And so I think without it, I would have been sort of scrambling this year as, being told like in my interview, like, oh yeah, we write our own curriculum here. I'm like, and so I think it was really helpful for me to have that to lean on. And I'm really grateful for it. Can't say I was grateful for it at the time where I'm like, I don't know what it is, I'm so stressed. But looking back, I'm really glad that I had those experiences. And even if you're going into a school that it is more scripted, I think it still gives you an idea of different ways you can adapt your lessons when you're building them from scratch, different ways, more tools in your toolbox on what you can do to improve what someone else has written, because nobody knows your students like you do. And so that was, that's really, I think, the most useful part of AU for me.
Oh, we're back to me. That's right. So I think like a lot of the other people here in this group, I'm sort of a generalist too. And that's sort of becoming a teacher is dabbling in a lot of things, right? You do some psychology, some sort of sociology, for me, language development. But I think AU always focused on keeping students at the center of your practice. And that's something that I definitely do as a teacher too. And it guides all your decisions that you make. You have a lot of decisions to make in the classroom about what technology you use, about curriculums or materials that you use. And if you keep your students as the guide for all those decisions, then you'll be on the right track. So I think I learned that at AU. I also had great classmates and professors, and teaching has some element of collaboration wherever you are. For me, it has a lot. So I think it also taught me how to collaborate, take feedback, and improve myself in that way.
Great, thank you. Makes me feel good about our program when I hear from our alums. So that's fabulous, thank you. So the next question is, what do you wish you knew before you started your current career? And I'm gonna go in the order of Brent, Laura, Tate, and then Nick. Nick, you gotta go last again. I hope that's okay. I meant to mix it up a little bit more. So Brent, Laura, Tate, Nick.
Yeah, I'm thinking. I think there's lots of stuff, right? Oh, I would say how not to follow other people. I don't know if that's right to say or whatever, but like, you know, a lot of teachers do like these intricate, amazing, colorful slideshows, right? That's not my thing. I'm sorry. Like, I'm not, I do some slideshows, but like, you know, the bulletin boards that are fancy, the rooms that are fancy, I'm all about like the outcome, you know, what do they need to know? How can I best teach it? Whether or not that's a slideshow is inconsequential, but like some teachers, like, I suppose I felt like I was always trying to look like, be like other teachers when I shouldn't be that way. That's all. You know, that's probably not something like, it's not something I didn't know. I didn't think about it until when I was in the practicum and then student teaching. I was just like, I was always saying like, I could never do that. Like, I'm not that person. I can never create that kind of intricacy, right? But then when you get into it, you just do it your own way. And then if it's successful, it's successful. And, you know, I think everyone is their own person as a teacher. And that's what I guess, didn't know. I just thought that you were supposed to be like amazing at everything. And that's not really true. So I don't know. I don't know if that helps. That's my 2 cents.
Yeah, I guess we talked about flexibility a little bit before, and you always need flexibility in your career. I mean, especially this past year, things have been constantly changing and there's been a lot of curveballs. So that's something I think you don't fully appreciate till you're in the classroom. Like, for example, for me, as an ESOL teacher, I've taught a lot of different contents in just the 3 years that I've been teaching. I'm a lot in science this year. I've done government, I've done English, I've done everything. And I didn't always expect that, even based on the endorsements that I had added. So, and I'm always, learning new things. So flexibility is definitely important.
If I could go back and tell myself anything, it would be that not everything can be or should be your number one priority. I think as a teacher in the field of education, we have like a to-do list that is always, there's something else being added to it all the time. And there's never enough time in your day. And I think that it's really important to sort of take a beat, take a second, and really think to yourself, like, what needs to be done before I leave the school building? What can wait until the morning? What can wait till Friday? What can wait till the end of the month? What doesn't have to be done at all? And I sort of like was thinking about that when Brent was speaking of That bulletin board, it doesn't have to be done. So if that's what the stress on you that's making you have anxiety or things are too piled on, then like it's just not going to be as colorful as you wanted it. And so I think it's really important that you prioritize your well-being, as well as thinking what am I trying to give to my students, and making sure that that's what your priority is, and anything else can wait. It doesn't all have to be done before you leave the school building.
Yeah, well said, Tate. I agree with you as well as far as time management, and I'll touch on that in just a moment. I was having difficulty answering this question just because I had a ton of questions at the beginning of when I started the program, and just through experience and through talking with all the people who've mentored me, you know, my cooperating teachers and just faculty and staff that have been around, I've kind of answered almost all my questions by the time I went into the teaching profession. So something that I would tell, you know, little Nick when he started off the master's program would just say that confidence comes with experience, or confidence comes out of experience. So, you know, I felt like I would never be ready. I felt like I would never be there, even when learning everything. But once you get in, you know, the best training is doing so. Once I actually got into the classroom and actually started doing things, that's when I started to develop my confidence. I started to develop my voice. I started to develop my own way of doing things, like what Brent was saying. And so, you know, just through doing things, you get that confidence and you really establish yourself as an educator. So coming in as a first year teacher, I had a lot of confidence because I've already had experiences. You know, I had some students trying to guess of, oh, are you a first year teacher? And I tell them not exactly, because I have been teaching for a couple of years through the experiences that I had at the university. So I don't consider myself first year. And similar to what Tate was saying, as far as time management, these are the questions that I constantly ask my professors and mentors throughout the program. But yeah, just don't get sucked in too much. This is a job that you can easily get sucked into and easily drop, you know, 12 hours a day doing things, but knowing when to cut yourself off is huge. And even master teachers now still have problems with that. So right off the bat, and especially during quarantine times, I knew to prioritize my mental health and when to cut things off, especially when you can't really escape work. It's with you always. So I make sure I have a cutoff of when I'm done answering parent emails, which will never stop, and student emails, which will never stop piling up, and when to have your deadline for grading things and when to cut it off and do it the next day. Or yeah, that bulletin board, now that we're returning back to school, I'm doing it a different time too, or not being upset when it doesn't turn out the way you want it to turn out. They don't teach you arts and crafts in this program, so you kind of have to learn about that as you go. That's probably the one thing I wish I knew. That's what I got.
Thank you. So now we'll go Tate, Nick, Laura, and then Brent. And the question is, how do you bring the anti-racist mission of the School of Education? We talk a lot about anti-racism and curriculum and pedagogy. And we as faculty have worked very hard, very diligently to bring that even more to the forefront. I think since many of you have graduated, for example, in 630, which is the class you had with Professor Schmidt, we're reading How to Be an Anti-Racist and incorporating that with other readings. So it's become even more important, particularly in the last year of racial reckoning that we have really experienced through this pandemic, through the health inequalities, the murder of George Floyd. So how do you bring that anti-racist message and mission of the School of Education into the roles that you occupy as an educator?
Happy to answer this first. So I would say that being an anti-racist and anti-bias teacher is sort of like the bedrock of my teaching philosophy. It's sort of the foundation of what I do. I start every school year I've done for like a curriculum night. I'll like email parents that are in my classroom and I say, if you want insight into my teaching philosophy, you should watch this TED Talk of Chimamanda and her dangers of a single story. And so if you haven't seen that, you should. And it's sort of about how important stories are and how hearing different kinds of stories, different people's stories, so you don't just have this one story of the world. And so I send that to parents, and it's just sort of like, this is what we're going to be doing in the classroom. This is what we talk about. We're unafraid in this classroom to have hard conversations. And so that's sort of like the way that I introduce who I am as a teacher. And then also for Learning for Change, which was previously known as teachingtolerance.org, is now Learning for Justice or Learning for Change. It's one or the other. But they have an anti-bias framework, and I sort of use that as like a guiding post for me as I'm teaching different topics to refer back to it. Our school created a spreadsheet this past summer, and we like input what we do in the classroom that mirrors or models that framework. And so it's really just everything that I'm doing in the classroom, I always tie it back to how is this anti-racist, anti-bias, and then interrogating and questioning my practices in the classroom. What purpose is this? What does it serve? Is it serving my students? Does this not serve me anymore? And so just always checking in with myself and what is going on in the classroom, what's going on in the world, does it feel right? And so that's pretty much the gist of it.
Nice. That's hard to follow, Tate. That was awesome. Well said. Yeah, the anti-racist mission, I would say, is two parts. One is internally with your pedagogy and your own personal beliefs and checking your own biases and privileges. The second part is what you show your students and how you respond to your external environment. And, their wonderful professor, Dr. Tracy Dennis at American University, was my mentor and teacher, and kind of hammered through anti-racist pedagogy and also hammer through culturally proficient pedagogy and what it means to be culturally proficient through the culturally relevant pedagogy and culturally relevant teaching. So we've kind of worked through and integrated that into our lens to the point where, I can't look at anything without having it through that anti-racist, that culturally proficient lens. With everything I do, with everything I preach and everything I reflect on my doing, specifically for the things in the curriculum that I do, it's kind of looking at a lens, and we realize, a lot of the curriculum is made and taught for, dead white men and all this other stuff. So you kind of need to look at what type of stories you're giving your students and what type of message you want to send to them. And I thoroughly believe that, we can truly change the world by preaching empathy and sharing different stories through literature. That's why I'm an English teacher. So I have that critical race lens, and I look through the types of readings that were given in class, and just having that anti-racist mission lens. It's looking at something and saying, okay, what's the full story? What are they leaving out in the story? Are we having proper representation from authors of different cultural backgrounds? Are students reflected in the work that they're seeing? Can they relate to teachings? Can they relate to things that are going on in their environment too? Culturally proficient teaching is having those high expectations for students and having high standards, but also knowing that they can succeed as well. So, I've specifically been looking at that, and at the bottom line of the external is just creating an inclusive environment, knowing that all students are appreciating your class and they're all wells of knowledge. They're all appreciated and they all believe that they can succeed because you believe that they succeed. So checking your own personal biases and your own prejudices and your own privilege, and just letting students know that this is an inclusive environment, that they're welcome in your classroom, is just another way to get rid of racism and to actively go against it, which is why we're anti-racist instead of just, it's not good enough to say not racist. So being upstanders instead of bystanders.
I've seen a lot of improvement in anti-racist teaching becoming more of a norm in the past couple of years. In where I teach, at least, we always talked about culturally responsive teaching. We always had trainings on cultural proficiency, but it's become a lot more introspective with sort of noticing your implicit biases. This has become a bigger deal in the past couple of years. And for me, I came with a basis of some of that, but a lot of my colleagues who've been teaching a long time, it's a big shift for them. So I think if you're coming with that framework already in mind, it helps you a lot to really implement it in your class, and you have to be really rigorous. I really appreciated Tate talking about how she plans for this and sort of is accountable, because that's so important. It has so many expressions in the text that we choose, in the images that we show with our lessons. There's just so much to unpack, and yeah, it's really essential to be a good teacher, that you be an anti-racist teacher.
Yeah, it's hard for me to follow up on all of that because everyone said it so succinctly. But like, you know, our motto in school is, you know, diversity strong, right? So I think it's important, as Nick said, about, you know, being a reading teacher, to expose kids to different literatures, different experiences, so that they can understand different points of view. And when you do that, I think, well, I hope that naturally kids get an understanding for different perspectives, whether or not it's a color or it's a culture or it's a religious experience or whatever. And so we spend a lot of time in school doing that. And obviously it's important as a teacher to make sure that the kids are exposed to all different ideas, all different people, and to realize that we all have differences. However, judging somebody on the base of anything um, is unfair. So I think that's all I can say about that.
Thank you. Thank you. The next question, I'm going to skip over. We had sent Tate, Laura, Nick, and Brent the questions, but I'm going to skip over and put the last two questions together so we give time for our audience. But the next question I'm going to ask is, what advice would you give a graduate entering the profession during these unprecedented times in educational history? And we'll start this question with Laura, and then go to Brent, then go to Nick, and then go to Tate.
During this unprecedented time, I think it's good to come with sort of a critical view of use of technology and how it serves your students. I've been through a few different instructional models in the past year. And through all that, you're still trying to teach your objectives, you're still trying to teach your content and your students. So you have to keep something central. And whether you're on Zoom or in person, find a way to make that work and find the best tools to serve your students. It's been a crazy past year, but I think that we're improving as teachers because of all the curveballs. I think it's been a growing year for teachers.
Yeah, and I would piggyback off that and say, yeah, I mean, know your technology, but you know, for me, it's just like, for all of us, a whirlwind trying to figure out all the issues. For me personally, it's really about the kids who really, before COVID or whatever, were struggling. Now they're really, really struggling, like badly. I mean, a quarter of my kids are in special ed and ESOL. It's like, and they're not, you know, they're not succeeding. They need to be in the classroom. So if they're not in the classroom, what do you do? I mean, I don't know. So I've got kids who are, you know, 99 percentile that can do whatever online or not online, doesn't matter where they're at, they can still succeed. So the kids who really need the help, their parents are opting out. Okay, so how to reach those kids? I've been in contact with ESOL teachers, special ed teachers, specialists to try to figure that out. So for me, I would say, yeah, I mean, you're trying to reach all the students, but as you know, differentiation is key. And how do you reach the kids who really, really, really need the help? You know, so I don't know. We're still struggling with that. I don't know if I have an answer other than them being in the classroom one-on-one or being pulled out in a small group. I mean, their videos are off. They're not doing the work. I mean, what do? I don't know. Their parents aren't answering the phones. I don't want to sound negative, but like, that's my issue. Like, I'm trying to talk to like my specialist about how to solve that. But, you know, I got all of them to come back except for one starting tomorrow. You know, thank goodness. Yeah, so that's been my thing. It's like, yeah, know the technology. There is a way to reach all students, even those who really don't contribute. I would say something like personal emails, that helps. Having some kind of like personal communication with students who really are falling off, that's been helpful. finding different ways to reach out to those kids who are really high need, because that's what we're trying to do now. So, you know, if it's going to be online, well, it's going to be online till the end of the year for most of the kids anyway. But yeah, so that's it. I don't know. That would be my thing. It was like, the technology is huge, obviously. I mean, I have like multiple cameras. I've got like a little wheelie thing with my laptop for the kids who are there, and the kids, you know, it's just, I got so many things happening, and you know, I really want to make sure that the kids who need it are getting it, and that's the thing. So that's all. I don't know.
I think Brent expressed a lot of frustration that we still see today, where, you know, there's a lot of students who need help, and we want to give them help. And I think a lot of teachers are, you know, in the correct mindset of we're going to put our best foot forward and do the best that we can to have equitable practices, like what Laura was saying too, with all the technology. You know, we're trying to do whatever we can to equitably help students, you know, whether it be that they're kind of striving in one area as opposed to another, or some students are adapting to this situation while others aren't, you know, kind of trying to meet them in the middle as far as reaching out to families, you know, having one-on-one meetings with students in different ways. So as part of my advice, flexibility is part of that. So being flexible, knowing that, okay, maybe I'll wake up a little bit early today and meet a student one-on-one to help them specifically understand a certain concept, or maybe I'll talk on the phone with somebody's family member or guardian about a specific thing that they need to work on. You know, having that flexibility and putting that into your schedule is helpful too. But just reminding yourself of doing equitable practices, I'm sure with Laura too, with sheltered instruction, of making sure that you're having different modes for students to do things with that work better for them, making sure, you know, with technology too, it's nice because it's verbal right in front, but also it's very visual where people can see right in front as well. Giving people standing practices too, you know, so we've adapted as we've gone on more and more and seen students become fatigued, not become fatigued. So, I mean, what Brent says too is students have to meet you in the middle, and sometimes students don't have great support systems at home, which definitely breaks your heart to see, you know, and we definitely want to see everybody succeed, but if they're not being helped, especially for sixth grade, they haven't developed those skills yet to fully advocate for themselves. So that's hard to see, but at least we're medium halfway and we're pushing them there. And that also relates to my next key, which was be empathetic. Every student is, and that's my advice for people getting into the profession is, you know, be empathetic towards, especially with online, if you don't see students as much, you don't really know the full story. You don't know, especially with COVID, you don't know who's been impacted by it. You don't know who is touched and whose family. And so just, you know, understand that everyone's going through something at some time, whether it be a teacher, whether it be a faculty member, whether it be a, you know, an administrator, whether it be a student or a family member. Everybody might be affected this way in very different ways, mentally and physically and emotionally. So just kind of being a little bit more empathetic and patient with your students as they may or may not do things. Don't take it personally. They just probably have a lot going on naturally. So having that flexibility with sometimes when things are submitted or not submitted, and being patient with them and working with them to help their own learning needs and standards is huge. So that would be my advice I'd give entering this profession now.
Excuse me. Oh my goodness. So I think my first point is very closely to the last one that Nick said, which is just like, these are unprecedented times. That's a part of the question. And so when you're thinking about that, it's allowing grace for your students, knowing that your pandemic didn't look like everybody's time during this pandemic has looked vastly different. And so understanding that and giving grace to the people, whether it be your coworkers, administration, the kids in your class, the family, everyone's experiences look different. And so just allowing grace for them, but also for yourself. I think our society values efficiency. We want it now, go, go, go. We want it to look like it looked before we were virtual or before the pandemic. And we have to adjust. I think we have to adapt our expectations and thinking to yourself, setting goals for yourself. What does success in teaching in a pandemic look like for me? It might not look the same as it did for me when I was in person or when I was teaching, you know, with these kids all the time. Like, what does success look like now for me? It's going to be different. And I have to adjust. I have to adapt. And that's being flexible is being a teacher. So that's really important. And I also think, you know, with the pandemic brought a lot of things to light that not everybody was aware of before, things that have always been, but the pandemic brought them to light. And so there's a lot of heaviness. And I think building in sort of like taking a pulse, you know, of the kids in your class, the people that are around you, taking that pulse and being okay with maybe we're going to take a break from what I had planned on doing, and we're just going to build in time for community, for joy, and for laughter in our space today. And knowing that's okay, because sometimes that's just, especially when you're on the computer all the time, it's hard. And so making sure that you're still building in those moments to build community, to play those. And I'm looking through a lens with first and second graders too. So like Zoom class was, oh my goodness, with 6-year-olds. So it's like still building in those times where like morning meeting that we had in person is going to look different. How can I still fill this Zoom room with joy? And so I think that's really important to think about, and, you know, just adapting and realizing it's okay if it's not the same.
Your turn, Laura.
I actually answered this one first.
Yeah, Laura was the first one.
It's okay though.
Speaking of Zoom fatigue, I am Zoom fatigued.
That's okay. Me too.
My apologies. Yeah, it's been quite a year, right? And I've come to understand so many of my memories are created by the context around me, right? By what room I'm sitting in, by what people are wearing, that whole take in of information. And I find myself repeating things all the time because I'm in the same place all the time, looking at a screen. And I'll look at my classes and go, Ginger's in my class this semester. I'll look at them sometimes and I'll go, did I tell you this already? I mean, have I said this? Because I don't remember who I said it to and who I haven't. So it has been quite a year, right? For all of us on so many levels. So I'm going to pause for a moment and ask if our participants, if our attendees have questions before we move on to the last 2 questions. And just unmute.
Yeah, I was just wondering, what would separate American from other graduate education programs?
Is that a question for everybody or just you, Carolyn?
No, I would appreciate it if the alums responded.
I mean, the reason I chose American,
faculty answer.
Yeah, well, the reason I chose American, I didn't search around like, you know, the entire universe, but I was working in the school for several years as a paraeducator in special ed. And what I was looking for, I needed a job. Okay, I need to continue my work, working in special ed while I got the degree. So while I got the degree, I was able to do practicum and student teaching at my place of work and continue to get paid. My principal figured that out with administration at American. And that's why I chose American. Not only that, I mean, obviously, so I live just outside downtown anyway. So I could have either driven to American campus or I could have done it online, doesn't matter. But, you know, having the flexibility of doing it online, you know, a couple of days a week, 3 days a week, or whatever, was helpful. But the big thing was that I could do practicum student teaching at Chevy Chase. And actually I got a job there because the teacher quit randomly right after I graduated. So other than that, I mean, I can't say what's super different. I mean, the program was amazing. The people were amazing. The curriculum's awesome. I learned tons, but you know, I'm sure every school is going to say that, but I mean, I can tell you from my opinion, like really, it's not, no one paid me to say this. It's awesome. So they're very flexible, so, and it's like a community.
Yeah, and Bridget, and I'll let you go, Tate, sorry. to Brent's point, Brent was a paraprofessional in the school. So he was a little bit of a unique case where we worked with the principal that he could have a student teaching there. Tate, when she went through the program, she was what's called a teacher of record. So she was her own teacher in the classroom. That's what we often see. But we can work with different scenarios. Nick and Laura were traditional student teachers. They weren't employed in schools. We found them student teaching placements. So we appreciate the complexities of schools, and Karen Ash, our director of field placement, is really masterful at being able to work different scenarios. And then I interrupted Tate, so I'll mute again and let her go on.
No, it's okay, because you brought up a point that I was loosely thinking about, but it really honed in on that for me. Was just, I felt like for my practicum and my teaching, student teaching, where I had like a mentor from my school already come and observe me, someone who had been there a really long time. I really felt like I still got something out of it, because my instructors made sure that I got something out of it, even though I'd been teaching for a few years already. But to answer why AU over another school, it's hard for me to say exactly why given that I haven't gone to another school for the graduate program. But I will say, for me, it was thinking about why I wanted to be a teacher and ensuring wherever I went honored that. And so looking at the website, seeing the mission, seeing what the school is all about, and making sure that aligns with your philosophy or what you envision before becoming a teacher.
Yeah, Bridget, I'm very much a vibes person. So I was kind of looking around programs in the DMV area, because that's just where I was trying to live, because my partner and I were moving down here together. And American, just the campus, beautiful, a really solid spot. It's more online now, so you might not see the campus as much. So you strip that away, you strip the campus and the location away, you kind of have to look at the heart and soul of the program and look at as far as who's working it, who's running it, where you're going to try to get behind, and who's going to get you ahead in the game. And I felt like American did that for me. First off, I had a really good vibe visiting and talking with Dr. Parker and the graduate coordinator at the time, but also Dean Holcomb McCoy is great. Julie Sarah, assistant dean, Adelaide, the special education program, and Dr. Tracy Dennis, Karen Ash, like all these names of these people that are just so dedicated to their students and will do anything for them. And are also pumping out that anti-racist mission that you want to see from the top down. So that's like really impressed me. And then, to be honest, like not even to just blow smoke up people's bums, but there's probably one of the best teachers I've ever had is the teachers that I've had at American. Just the people that I surrounded myself with, truly are teachers during the day, and they teach at night. So now me teaching, I'm thinking that's insane of how much teaching they do. That's so much. But they teach, they've had that lifelong experience, and teachers teaching teachers is probably like a goal of mine in the future, because of how helpful it was, and how understanding they are, and how responsive they'll be, flexible with you at deadlines. They'll talk to you, they'll talk shop, they'll talk to you about what you're doing in your classroom and try to help you with anything. And the connections that I made through the teachers too have been helpful, and the mentorships and the things I've learned along the way. Americans program too, with learning that pedagogy, getting that foundation, and then sending you out was really helpful, and was a seller for me too, of that experiential education that people preach so much. And for teaching, you really need that. You can't really just go out off of book knowledge and think that you're going to swim. So for me, it was great to have the practicum experience, and also something that Karen Ash does, which Emmett, the program does, which is brilliant, is they put you in a lot of different situations and you kind of learn. So for my practicum, I was in a Title I school in DC Capitol Hill cluster, and I thoroughly enjoyed my time there. But then, that's more socially economic, disadvantaged students, and not a diverse population. And then we go over, and I'm on a different spectrum in high school, where I'm at a very wealthy school in Montgomery County. So I have made connections in 2 different districts. So I still have people there that would offer me a job if I asked for it. Or if they're able to hire, depending on how things are now. And so I got to see kind of the breadth of how things are equitably and equally. So, seeing different types of populations, figuring out where you want to fit, where you want to teach, and what type of students you want to serve was awesome too. That I got the breadth of that experience. It definitely made me appreciate a lot of things like having paper to print. Some schools don't have paper to print and having shortages and buying your own supplies and stuff. So through different experiences, I've really appreciated the program a lot. And so I would say just the vibe check of the people that are here are truly dedicated, and it's nice to have that. So if you take away the campus, you take away the DMV area, if we're still online, you at least have really good teachers that are going to help you out.
Yeah, Bridget, our dean, Cheryl Holcomb McCoy, was a kindergarten teacher. I don't know if the alums know that, but Cheryl started her career as a kindergarten teacher at Greencastle Elementary School, which is near where I live. And it's a Title I school. It's an elementary school that is challenged. And I've lived in the area for 25 years now, and that experience as a kindergarten teacher at Greencastle just formed her way of thinking around teaching and teacher education. And this is my third institution of higher education, and I worked at GW when my kids were very, very small, and I worked there part-time. It gave me the flexibility to be home with my now teenagers. And then I was up at Johns Hopkins with Cheryl, with Dean Holcomb McCoy. We worked there together as colleagues. And I can say, and I'm not, again, blowing smoke up, American University is the most teacher education focused of the three institutions. We truly believe in developing good teachers, helping you be the best teacher you can be. There's a lot of research evidence that even after a master's program, there's still a lot of learning to do. And I think Laura, Tate, Nick, and Brent talked about that you're always learning, teaching, and the research demonstrates that, right? It takes 4 to 7 years for a teacher to really hit their stride. But we take great pride in supporting you through the 2 years of the master, the year and a half of the master's degree, to be the best teacher you can be in that first year, knowing that there's still going to be areas for growth, and trying to provide support to our alums as you move out into that educational space as an independent teacher. And now I'll stop.
I will say, if I can add real quick, this is kind of random, but and this goes to your point, and this is only because you just mentioned that, not because I'm talking about myself. So we have CTs. We're supposed to get CTs the first year, right? So we have a CT. I have a CT, and you know how they walk you through the program, and then they come into your class like once or twice a week, and they do a write up, blah blah blah. You do a lesson plan all the time and submit it to them. It's basically being in school again. Okay. Well, after 3 months, 2 months, sorry, I think it was late October, maybe early November, I don't know. So the CT that I have, she basically just said that I don't need to observe you anymore, because usually it's in the entire year. It's from September until I think April 15th or 20th or something, when she recommends or doesn't recommend you to be a teacher or whatever. But she was like, I just straight up don't recommend even seeing you anymore. And I was shocked by that. I thought it was bad. And then she was like, no, it's good. I'm going to talk to your principal, and if she agrees, then I don't need to be your CT anymore. I'll still help you if you need help, but I'm not coming to your class anymore. You don't need to develop any lesson plans anymore. Anyway, I just thought I would mention that. I just thought that was, and as you say, I mean, American does teach you just to like be yourself, and you have all the knowledge, and you go in there and you just do it. And I think because when the CT comes in the class, she or he is like, I have all these points to hit, and then you see all the points and you're like, oh my gosh, like how can I hit all those points in one little lesson? Like that's only 15 minutes. Well, you just do it naturally. I don't look at the points. I just teach the thing, right? And then sort of just happens. I don't know, but I thought I would just say that because you are right. I think like we're taught so much stuff, and then when you get out of it, you're just like overwhelmed in a way, because if you see a list, I don't like lists. I just like doing it, right? And anyway, I know the list in my head, like as I do it, I can feel like when the kids are not understanding and like what I have to say to like help. And I think that's what the program taught me anyway. So take it for what it's worth.
Ginger can take this back to her classmates who are feeling very overwhelmed by my class in social studies methods and practicum right now.
I
We'll
do
share
want
the
to be,
recording.
yeah, we are going to be sharing this recording. So thank you again for everyone for coming. I want to be respectful of our alumni's time. So we do have 5 minutes left. We have time for another question. If you would like to ask one, if you're not comfortable, saying that, whatever, you can put it in the chat if you'd like. That's also fine. Just last call on questions while we're still before the hour deadline here. Also, Nicholas, I love your calendar. Very nice.
In Justice League, I got it for Christmas. I'll
Very
use it now.
nice.
Thanks.
I'll give a little wait time for questions.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, clarification too, what Brent was talking about, cooperating teachers is CT. It depends on what district you work for. That's something that drew me to work for Montgomery County, is they have CTs, which is kind of like a safety net for first year teachers, where you're going to have somebody who's going to come in and evaluate you and give you a lot of feedback to help you grow as an individual. So that's what drew me to Montgomery County a lot, because a lot of different districts, they might not have that program in place or might have an informal mentorship. So when I was doing a lot of research for where I'd like to work, I don't know for Fairfax with Laura, or if they do something similar, but your cooperating teacher will typically be with you for about a year and they'll go through. So it sounded like Brett was saying they're using all the stuff that they learned from school, and they were able to apply that to the point where the CT was impressed. So yeah, it's definitely nice to have a cooperating teacher with you and to help you, especially your first year, which is a very difficult year, I can confirm.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we do have mentors in Fairfax County. They don't call them CTs, but there is sort of a formal, they come into your classroom a couple of times. So yeah, I was also thinking about when we were talking about, being observed and getting used to that, which the program will get you used to. Also, the portfolio process for the program is very similar to what I do every year when I'm on evaluation in my district. Like, I collect evidence, artifacts, with different standards. So that's something that's good to get used to too, because you'll have much more of that.
And I'll ask one more quick question. What doors did this degree open for you that may have been unexpected?
It got me my job that I currently have. But I think Nick made this point of like going to different places, maybe being placed in schools for like practicum and student teaching that you wouldn't have necessarily thought of. And so I had always had it in my head that I was going to be in a public school. And I was so I moved to Ann Arbor from DC. And so I had a job in DC. So I was the teacher of record. But then as I was moving to Ann Arbor, that was going to shift. And I was like, oh no, more money. But so I was in a meeting with my principal and I sort of was like, I'm just going to shoot my shot because they have a job opening. So I asked and applied and got that job. So I ended up being the teacher of record again, but it was at a school that I would have never, ever in a million years applied to because it was small. I had an assumption made already about independent schools. I've never really experienced project-based learning. And so they sort of introduced me to an experience that I wouldn't have ever had otherwise. And I love it. I love it so much. I'm so happy at the school I'm with. I feel supported. I feel trusted and autonomous for the things that I teach and the conversations that I have with my students. And I honestly would not have ever taught at this school had it not been for the placement. And so they really do a good job at making sure that you get experiences that you might not have considered even for yourself.
Tate, I love that journey for you. That's awesome. I'm glad that you're really happy where you're at. I see you. Yeah, similarly, you're just going to get connections and build that networking. So, for the opportunity, unfortunately, my student teaching, they weren't hiring, but they clearly they said to me, we'd hire you if we could. We just are at max capacity for a large high school. But it opened my mind up to middle school. I was ride or die high school, and then a job opportunity popped up for middle school. And I really enjoyed my middle school experience with the Title I school, just the students and the type of environment that it was, and ended up applying, and that's where I teach now. So just having that, opening up your mind to a lot of different possibilities, and making you realize that your goal isn't necessarily linear all the time for where you want to be. Sometimes you'll get zips and zags and you go in different experiences, but that only makes you a better educator instead of just staying in one lane. So that was having those connections is something that was unexpected for me, that is welcome now.
Yeah, I would agree with Nick and Tate as well. I would just say that, like, it did just open more doors, like not a one-lane highway. I mean, we think that we're interested in one grade level or one subject, and then you realize that maybe later on you might be interested in other things. So that's why I got, certifications in different areas, and I think later on I might explore those areas. But I'm happy where I'm at now, and I think that, initially you're just like, yeah, I want to get certification, I want to get a job, but and you just realize that, maybe as you grow a little bit, then a couple years down the line, I might think that I want to do something else, like maybe middle school, maybe 8th grade, because I'm kind of sarcastic like 8th graders, but we'll see, or like high schoolers. But I think it's cool, and I obviously got the job, which I'm very happy about. So.
I had some different experiences too. I was at a bilingual middle school in DC for my practicum placement, and I was definitely also focusing on high school. So that's what I did for my student teaching, and that's what I ended up doing. But being exposed to different school districts, different levels, and just the idea of bilingual school, it's sort of nice when I think back to it, thinking of all your students as emerging bilinguals instead of these are the ESOL students who are learning English and the rest of us are just people who speak English. Going back to that perspective, sometimes I thought it was good to be exposed to, for me in particular, as an ESOL teacher. Mm-hmm.
ESOL instead of ELL, emerging English language learners, right? It's interesting, the US perspective, American perspective on, we're the only country who don't truly appreciate people who speak second languages, other languages other than English, right? So anyway, any last questions? I thank you so much, Laura, Tate, Brent, and Nicholas, for spending the evening with us. I know how busy you're all working. Really fun to catch up and see all of you. If you have questions that you'd like us to reach out to the alum, we're happy to do that. You can email Max or you can email me. Thank you for joining us. And it was really great to catch up with all of you. So happy you're doing well.
Yeah, it was great to see you guys.
Nice to see you all. Enjoy the rest of your night.
Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a wonderful night.